Hello. Today we will tell you about artificial breeding oysters. The meat of these sea mollusks is valued all over the world, as it has a high nutritional and therapeutic value. No wonder the use of oysters and mussels has been practiced for more than 100 years. Today demand for mussels and oysters exceeds market supply. Fresh oysters are always welcome in restaurants and cafes. Therefore, more and more people are starting mussel and oyster farming business. The undisputed leader in the production of oysters and mussels in Europe is France. The French poet Léon-Paul Fargue once wrote, "Oysters are the kiss of the sea on the lips." Oysters, as well as mussels and snails, have firmly entered the French cuisine. Until the 19th century, oysters remained the most popular food available to all segments of the population. In rich houses were cooking a variety of dishes from them, baked in pies, stuffed them with a bird or just ate dozens, not counting. Oysters were a substitute for meat for the poor. In France, any owner of an oyster farm must complete a special 2-year training program. The state teaches future businessmen not only the cultivation of shellfish, but also the basics of ecology and economics. Needless to say, this approach makes French oysters one of the highest quality in the world. Before I tell you how clams are grown, I will tell you a little about how oysters and mussels differ from each other. Although they belong to the same class, they are completely different in appearance and taste. Mussels are smaller than oysters. They are unpretentious to the habitat and can move along the bottom. Oysters are much larger than mussels, somewhere in 2 or 3 times. They lead a sedentary lifestyle and are not able to move along the bottom. Also, these mollusks have a different appearance. Mussels have a smooth shell with sharp edges. Oysters are rough to the touch with wavy shells. Finally, the main difference between them is that mussels should never be eaten raw, while oysters, on the contrary, are most often served raw. Although mussels are a delicacy shellfish, they cost much less than oysters. This is due to the fact that mussels are much easier to breed, and I will talk about them in the next video. Today we will talk about oysters. As for oysters, they are grown along the entire coastline of France. There are about 3,000 oysters farms. The most famous areas are both banks of the English Channel, Brittany, Normandy, Kent and Essex, Arcachon, and Mediterranean coast of the country. In the province of Brittany in northern France, the most suitable climate for growing oysters. Stable and temperate climate of the region allows oysters grow and absorb all the power of water for the best flavor. There is no sweltering heat here, but there are no frosts either. This climate is very favorable for oysters. It is important to know that a temperature jump of even 10 degrees is capable of killing the oyster. Oysters grow very slowly to the finished adult state, from 3 to 5 years. But, for their breeding, it is not necessary to buy seedlings and feed them. Oyster fry brought by the sea. They grow in their natural environment. All it takes is not a cunning set of tools, a seashore and patience. As a result, it turns out that farmers cannot artificially influence on the growth of oysters. They can only help them grow in natural conditions and acquire taste. In France, 2 types of oysters are grown, flat and rounded. Further, each species is divided into categories, of which there are more than 50 today. The categories depend on the place and duration of refining. Also, the size of oysters has its own measurement scale. Oyster farmers lease sea hectares from the state in the same way that farmers rent land for agricultural work. The entire bay is divided into sections owned by different farms. The plan of the bay is one of the main documents of the oyster farm, since it is necessary to strictly observe water boundaries with neighbors. The entire cycle of growing oysters is divided into several stages. In the first stage, oyster caviar or oyster fry are harvested by hand in the wild. The oyster is a hermaphrodite, so it reproduces without outside interference. The best time is summer. Hence the belief that oysters are not eaten in summer. Juveniles are born inside the shell, about 5 pieces in one. And after 3 or 5 days, the fry come out. At this time, they need to gain a foothold somewhere. Usually these are stones or special collectors at a depth. It is at this stage that they are harvested by hand for further cultivation on farms. Big problem is that for the first year, due to different causes and circumstances, 35% of fry die. Then another 10% die on average every year. That is, during the growing period, a total of about 70 or 80% of oysters die from the original amount. That is why not every farm can afford to work with fry. Baby oysters are placed in special nets and placed on the so-called tables on the shore of the bay. Daily ocean tides have a good effect on the growth of oysters. It should be noted that the tide schedule is another important document for the farm. All work must be done at low tide. Oysters, like people, grow differently. Some quickly, some slowly, some are thin, others are plump, and it is simply impossible to artificially influence the uniformity of growth. Nets with oysters are turned over, tapped with a stick, mixing them, about once every 2 weeks. Thus, the shape of the shell and the meat inside acquire a more. The shell will be long and narrow, and the mollusk itself will not be so fleshy. The whole process takes about a year. After a year, the molluscs are lowered to the bottom of the bay for another 2 years, for further growth. This is the second stage of production, and at this stage there are also risks. It is a storm or marine predators, seagulls, starfish, snails, crabs and some types of fish. All this time, oysters feed on plankton brought by the sea. After 3 years, the next stage begins. Oysters are sorted by hand and selected ready for refining, aging in éclairs, such natural freshwater reservoirs. In the process of refining, the taste of the oyster softens, becomes more deep. Excess salt is removed. Therefore, refining takes place in fresh water, usually in a river. Its duration is from 3 months to 12. Before transportation, batches of delicacy are carefully packed in boxes so that they do not lose moisture and do not die on the road. The rest are returned to the bay. In order to get oysters, special cars leave, which seethe water with nets, and the so-called water vacuum cleaner pulls oysters onto a longboat. Previously, this was done entirely by humans and took much longer. On the bank of the river there is a workshop for sorting and packing shellfish, which allows you to reduce the time for delivery, respectively, to preserve freshness as much as possible. The oysters extracted from the water are fed onto a conveyor belt. Each oyster is tapped by hand to determine the density of the meat inside the shell. If the worker has doubts, the oyster is placed on a second belt, which returns them back to the river to continue refining. Part of the oysters that are subject to conservation, the workers at the enterprise open with special knives. In fact, this is a very monotonous and tedious work. Therefore, it is not difficult to understand why the price of oysters is so high, given the investment in their cultivation and processing. Oysters are packing in wooden boxes of various sizes, but the quantity is always a multiple of 12. Moreover, they are packed in a certain way so that the oyster retains moisture. Indeed, with a loss of 20% of water, the mollusk will die on the road. The process of shipment of oysters is daily and never interrupted. The oyster farm is open 7 days a week. But during the Christmas holidays, the number of employees doubles or even triples, because in France these days there is a sharp jump in sales. After all, oysters are a traditional Christmas dish for the French. Did you know that India is the 3rd largest salt producer in the world, and a third of this salt comes from the depths of the Little Rann of Kutch Desert? Only those who can withstand the hot and arid climate can work and live here. And farmers from the Agaria caste are engaged in this hard work. The link to this video is on the right. Click and enjoy the salt growing video. And that's all for today. If you like this video, do not forget to like, subscribe to the channel, press the bell so as not to miss the news. And don't forget to leave your opinion in the comments. See you in the next issue. Bye.